Tonight, several developing stories as we come on the air. Republican leaders rally around former President Donald Trump after his criminal conviction. Some senators even threatening to stall legislation. The latest Gaza ceasefire plan, are the U.S. and Israel on the same page? And breaking news from Arizona, 6 people shot, 2 killed, including an officer. First, support for the former president. GOP leaders rushing to his defense. House Speaker Mike Johnson calling for the Supreme Court to step in to overturn his conviction. Senators threatening to grind the Senate to a halt. Donations pouring into the Trump campaign, nearly $53 million since the guilty verdicts. Mary Alice Parks standing by. Clashing comments on the Gaza ceasefire plan outlined by President Biden. Is the plan already in trouble? Tonight, Israel's prime minister calling it a non-starter, insisting the fighting won't stop until Israel's conditions are met, including the destruction of Hamas. Britt Clennett in Israel tonight. Dangerous weather taking aim at the nation's heartland. 7 states from the Gulf Coast to the plains, some facing flash flooding, hail, and possible tornadoes, and what has already been one of the most active tornado seasons on record. Our weather team tracking it all. Boeing's historic launch is scrubbed. The countdown halted just minutes before the Starliner was to carry 2 astronauts into space. What went wrong? Plus, a massive data breach. Live Nation confirming that Ticketmaster was hacked. The information of more than 500 million customers stolen. Chad Daybell sentenced to death. The decision coming 2 days after he was convicted of killing his first wife and his second wife's 2 children. A massive water outage in Atlanta after multiple water main breaks. A hospital relocating patients. Residents warned to boil water. And America Strong tonight, the Cinderella story in college baseball. The unlikely team turning heads in the World Series, competing after the university closed its doors.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight.
Good evening. It's great to have you with us on this Saturday. I'm Whit Johnson. We begin tonight with the ongoing fallout and reaction following Donald Trump's historic felony conviction, the first former president to ever be tried and found guilty of a crime. And now Republicans are rallying around their presumptive nominee. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson is calling on the Supreme Court to step in and overturn the conviction, but that's something that Johnson said could take time. The former president railing against the verdict, but his campaign says it's already raised nearly $53 million in much-needed cash in the days since the jury's decision. But what impact could all of this have on what voters do in November? ABC's White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks leads us off from Washington.
Republican lawmakers tonight rushing to Donald Trump's defense, vowing to investigate the New York officials who brought the hush money case against him. 8 Republican senators saying they'll stall the business of the Senate as payback for the jury's guilty verdict.
Donald Trump committed a paperwork violation. Is that 34 felony counts not in the country that I want to live in?
House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan demanding District Attorney Alvin Bragg and others testify before Congress. The former president was convicted as charged by a 12-person jury. Those jurors, selected by the prosecution and defense, finding Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts of falsifying business records to cover up a hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels to keep her story from voters before the 2016 election. A new Reuters Ipsos poll conducted immediately after the verdict, finding now 1 in 10 registered GOP voters saying they are less likely to vote for Trump. Since the guilty verdict, Trump has been unloading and lashing out. At one point Friday, making the outrageous claim that the U.S. is fascist.
This is a case where if they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone.
President Biden responding.
And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible.
Later, with a joke, outright dismissing Trump and Republicans' claims that he was somehow driving the case.
He thinks you're pulling the strings behind the scenes, doing all this to help yourself.
I didn't know it was that powerful.
Yeah, the Trump campaign says it raised an eye-popping $53 million since the verdict. Democrats fundraising too. The Biden campaign sent out a text message from the president today quoting that number from Republicans, but then urging their supporters to chip in to help him fight back. Whip.
Mary Alice Parks, thank you. Overseas now, in the war in Gaza, a major rift appears to be emerging between the U.S. and Israel, specifically over President Biden's recent address outlining a proposed ceasefire. Israeli forces moving ahead with their offensive in southern Gaza, as Prime Minister Netanyahu today called the idea of a complete end to the fighting a non-starter. ABC's Britt Clennett in Israel tonight with late reporting.
Tonight, an Israeli government official telling ABC News that Prime Minister Netanyahu's office was not informed about President Biden's announcement detailing a permanent ceasefire, saying his office was told the president would just be addressing hostage negotiations. Netanyahu responding to Biden's presentation of the Israeli proposal, calling a full end to the fighting in Gaza a non-starter until Israel's conditions are met. Netanyahu advisor Ophir Falk reiterating that dismantling Hamas and retrieving the hostages must come first.
So you wouldn't end the fighting permanently first?
The notion that a permanent ceasefire will kick in without us destroying Hamas and freeing our hostages is a non-starter.
A senior U.S. official tonight saying they engaged with the Israelis at multiple levels, but they would not comment on whether Netanyahu was briefed about the full details of yesterday's announcement of a three-part proposal to end the war, which includes plans for a temporary end to fighting and for Israel to begin negotiations for a permanent ceasefire.
It's time for this war to end, for the day after to begin.
And just days before Biden's announcement, Israel's national security advisor saying he expects the war to continue through the end of the year. But on the ground here in Tel Aviv, these massive demonstrations urging the Israeli government to follow through with the deal.
There are protests here every week, but tonight there's an optimism among the hostage families that Biden can put an end to their misery.
Nama Weinberg desperately hoping to bring the body of her cousin Itay Sversky back to Israel.
I think that for the first time and after a very long time, there is a bit of hope.
Where tonight, right-wing Israeli officials are digesting the news after Shabbat, threatening to resign if Israel follows through. But Egypt and Qatar adding to U.S. pressure to accept the deal.
Britt Clennett for us tonight. Thank you. And tune in to This Week tomorrow morning. George Stephanopoulos will speak with White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby about the state of the war in Gaza. Turning now to the severe weather threat, millions are on alert from the plains into the south. Hail, high winds and tornadoes, all possible. These images coming in overnight from Lubbock, flashes of lightning you see there, and the city expecting more of the same again tonight. Let's get right to ABC News meteorologist Samara Theodore. And Samara, these are some of the very same places that have already been hit hard over the past few weeks.
That's correct, Whit. And we have severe thunderstorm watches that are now going into effect through tonight. One particularly in Colorado was now expanded into the state of Kansas and Nebraska. We're also monitoring southern Texas, areas like Fort Stoughton and Louisiana. It's there where we have a flash flood threat specifically for New Orleans. We also are monitoring a flash flood threat farther north tomorrow in the northern plains. It's there where robust, strong, severe thunderstorms are possible through Sunday afternoon. There we could see damaging wind along with a few isolated tornadoes. One good note is, that we are anticipating in the week ahead to get a little break from the severe weather.
All right, we will take that break. Samara, thanks so much. Now to what turned out to be another disappointing and expensive day for Boeing. Its highly anticipated Starliner launch scrubbed with just minutes to go. The crew already on board and ready. The delay blamed on a computer problem, which is not under Boeing's control. Here's ABC's Faith Abube from Cape Canaveral.
Tonight, new problems for Boeing's Starliner mission. Moments after the spacecraft was cleared for the historic launch.
Hold.
The liftoff scrubbed with less than 4 minutes left on the clock. Commander Butch Wilmore had even delivered a heartfelt farewell speech.
We are one nation under God, indivisible. And when we together use the power of that combination, we can do some pretty amazing things.
The launch derailed by a computer problem with the ULA rocket that carries the Boeing spacecraft. This was the Starliner's second attempt in a month to send humans to the International Space Station. The mission, already years behind schedule, repeatedly grounded by software glitches, fuel valve and parachute problems on both the Boeing spacecraft and the ULA rocket.
What do you tell anyone out there who's losing faith in this mission?
The vehicles were ready. We just happen to have an unlucky ground card problem. So we'll fly when we're ready, and it should be soon.
The next possible launch window is next Wednesday. And with NASA awarded Boeing more than $4 billion to get this mission off the ground and carry astronauts back and forth from the International Space Station. But the repeated delays have impacted this, increased the price tag, costing Boeing nearly $1.5 billion of its own money. Whit.
All right, Faith Abube, thank you. Next tonight, Live Nation, the parent company of Ticketmaster, confirming it was hit by a cyber attack. The user data of hundreds of millions of people now compromised. It's just the latest in a series of problems for the company and the industry. ABC's M. Nguyen reports from Washington.
Tonight, the nation's largest concert promoter and ticket seller launching an investigation after announcing the personal data of more than 500 million Ticketmaster users had been breached. The parent company Live Nation Entertainment confirmed in a filing late Friday they discovered what they call unauthorized activity in a third-party cloud database less than 2 weeks ago. The hackers, reportedly called shiny hunters, allegedly offered up the stolen data to the highest bidder on the dark web. Names, emails, phone numbers, addresses, and credit card information, among other details.
This may be their biggest breach to date.
The company tonight says they're working to mitigate risk to our users and the company and are cooperating with law enforcement. This comes as the DOJ and 30 state and district attorneys general filed antitrust lawsuits, arguing Live Nation and Ticketmaster need to break up, maintaining the company they say controls ticket sales, artist management, and venue ownership, and allegedly inflated concert ticket prices illegally. For those concerned about their information online, experts say to change your password and use two-factor authentication.
M. Nguyen in Washington tonight. Thank you. We turn now to the growing concerns over the spread of bird flu. A third human case has now been reported in the U.S., another farm worker in Michigan. While officials say the risk to the general public remains low, work on vaccines is already underway. Here's ABC's Phil Lipoff.
Tonight, scientists are ramping up vaccine testing to prevent bird flu transmission between cows and people, as the CDC confirms a third rare human case in the U.S. A cow likely infecting a Michigan dairy worker, now the first to show respiratory symptoms like coughing. That patient now on an antiviral medication and recovering at home. The previous two cases showed symptoms like pink eye. Federal health authorities investing millions to limit the spread among livestock. The USDA announcing an additional $800 million in emergency aid for testing, virus surveillance, developing bird flu vaccine for livestock, and food safety studies. Federal officials still requiring testing before cattle cross state lines. The USDA confirming 68 outbreaks in dairy cow herds across at least 9 states since March. The USDA says ultimately we want to eliminate the virus, and developing a vaccine to prevent another emergence of H5N1 in cattle will be an important step toward that end. But that step in humans is likely still far off.
Ultimately, if we reduce the virus amounts in livestock, it's going to reduce the chance that this virus has for jumping into humans.
Whit, there is no science to suggest that bird flu is being transmitted from human to human. Scientists are still testing vaccines in humans. Those at highest risk, farm workers with exposure to livestock. Whit.
All right, Phil Lipoff, thank you. We appreciate it. Now to a major development in a story we've been covering here. The Florida deputy who killed Senior Airman Roger Fortson during a call about a domestic dispute has been terminated. The Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office finding former Deputy Eddie Duran's use of force violated policy. The question now, will Duran be charged? Here's ABC's Morgan Norwood.
Tonight, a Florida sheriff's deputy who fatally shot a black airman has been fired after an internal investigation found his use of force was not objectively reasonable. Still, no charges have been filed.
Sheriff's Office, open the door!
The Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office finding Deputy Eddie Duran's life was not in imminent danger when he responded to Senior Airman Roger Fortson's apartment for a domestic disturbance call. Fortson's family says he was alone at the time and on the phone with his girlfriend on May 3rd when body camera video shows he answered the door holding a gun pointed directly at the ground, Duran shooting him just 2 seconds later. The Internal Affairs report says Duran told investigators, "When I saw his eyes, I saw aggression." But the sheriff's office, finding Mr. Fortson did not make any hostile, attacking movements. Fortson family attorney Ben Crump calling for criminal charges, saying the video footage provides damning proof that this was a brutal and senseless killing of a young man.
The sheriff looked at the body cam, reviewed all of the evidence, and found sufficient evidence of misconduct, and that is why he's fired. So that tends to lead a lot of credence to the fact that criminal charges will be filed.
And we reached out to the attorney for Deputy Duran and have not heard back.
Morgan Norwood with those new details tonight. Thank you. Now to Mexico, the country gearing up for a historic presidential election, and more than 20,000 positions nationwide are up for grabs. ABC's Jacqueline Lee is following this. And Jacqueline, these elections also gaining attention for the level of political violence.
That's right. More than 200 people have been killed this election cycle, and voters say public safety is their #1 priority. Now, when it comes to the presidential election, the two main candidates are both women. On the one side is Claudia Sheinbaum. She is a Jewish environmental engineer turned politician. She's the former mayor of Mexico City, and she's considered the protege of the current president. On the other side is Xochitl Galvez. Now, she comes from humble beginnings. She has indigenous roots. She became an entrepreneur, and now she's leading a coalition of center-right parties that used to lead Mexican politics. And it is worth noting, Mexico has only ever been led by a man.
All right, Jacqueline Lee, thank you so much. A jury in Idaho today sentencing Chad Daybell to death. Daybell convicted just 2 days ago for killing his first wife and the two youngest children of his second wife, Lori Vallow Daybell. The children, ages 7 and 16, were found buried in Daybell's yard the year after they went missing. Vallow Daybell is now serving a life sentence. There's still much more ahead on World News Tonight this Saturday, including a mass shooting in Arizona. One officer killed, another wounded, and the urgent work to restore the water supply in Atlanta after multiple water mains broke. Next tonight, authorities in Arizona are searching for a suspect after a fatal shooting on the Gila River Indian Reservation. 2 people were killed, including a police officer. 4 others were wounded, one of them another officer. The officer who was killed, Jonathan Breezy, was brand new to the force and still on training duty. His father, also an officer, died in the line of duty back in 2006. Much of downtown Atlanta was shut down today as crews worked to restore water service after multiple water mains broke. Water gushed into the street when the breaks were discovered Friday. One hospital was forced to relocate some patients. Tanker trucks were brought in to deliver water to maintain air conditioning. Residents throughout metro Atlanta who have water are being told to boil it before drinking or cooking. When we come back, American veterans return to Normandy 8 decades after the pivotal battle of World War II. To the index now, Thursday marks the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the Allied invasion that turned the tide of World War II. More than 60 U.S. veterans of World War II arrived in France today for ceremonies, the group ranging in age from 96 to 107 years old. On June 6, 1944, 160,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches at Normandy to begin the liberation of Europe from the Nazis. More than 2,500 Americans were killed on D-Day itself. Still ahead, the team without a school, college baseball's unlikely heroes. Finally tonight, America Strong. There's nothing like the pride in playing for your own university, even when it ceases to exist.
It's this year's Cinderella story of college baseball.
Birmingham Southern will play in the Division III College World Series.
The Panthers of Birmingham Southern College in Alabama punching their unlikely ticket to the D3 World Series. But the moment was bittersweet. In late March, the college announced it would be closing its doors due to budget deficits at the end of the school year.
Kind of a gut punch.
The coach delivering the news to his players.
He said we can either give in to what's going on with the school and kind of give up on the season, or we can say, hey, like this is it. Like let's give it one last ride.
Players stepped up.
There's nothing to lose.
And a bunt out in front of the plate.
Going on to win 17 of their final 21 games. Then facing even more adversity when 9 players suffered from a stomach virus. But they still went on to sweep the regional series.
The doors may be closing, but the final chapter has not been written.
Launching the Panthers to this weekend's World Series. Their future's unclear, but winning the hearts of baseball fans across the country.
And we wish them all the very best. I'm Wade Johnson in New York. Have a great night.
Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Muir, America's most watched newscast.